All right, this is Zach and Jodelle with GetFitWithJodelle.com and MusclesAndVeggies.com. And we are doing a podcast today that is all about dopamine. So we're going to jump right into this thing. We're going to learn the ins and outs of dopamine, why it's important, what does low dopamine look like, what are the causes of low dopamine, healthy ways to raise it. Jodelle, jump right in here, get us started. Why is dopamine important? What is it? What does it mean to us?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about it because there seems to be an influx of people, maybe you see this in your practice too, but a lack of motivation from a lot of people, whether it's in regard to just getting out of bed and not struggling to get through the day or lacking motivation to exercise or eat properly. There's definitely a lack of motivation. And what dopamine is your neurotransmitter that's responsible for motivation. Now, it's been said that it is your pleasure neurotransmitter too. It's kind of like you get dopamine by those pleasurable activities, but it's more so you can actually increase dopamine in high stress times too when you're just trying to struggle to get through those really hard things. And over time, though, that's not the healthiest way to do it, is to just burn the candle at both ends and get through. There's some things we want to talk about today that boost dopamine levels naturally so that you can have pleasure and also have that motivation to do the things that you say, oh, I want to do that, but man, I just can't get up and do it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone is lacking motivation, maybe they're fatigued, maybe they're feeling run down, explain what does low dopamine look like? What does a lack of dopamine do to us that we need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so since it's kind of like your zest for life, you will see a lot of like lethargy, lack of motivation, like we talked about, a little joy for life. Like you don't get a lot of pleasure out of your day. Maybe the highlight of your day is that Snickers bar that you eat at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or watching your favorite program at night. That's the highlight of your day. And when those things start to happen, that's when life is kind of, we know it's out of balance a little bit. But they rely on caffeine a lot. So these are like some of the symptoms you'll see. They have to have that caffeine in the morning just to struggle through their day. They are often procrastinating. People with low dopamine actually are very procrastinational in terms of getting things done. Low libido is another one. They're going to have some not great sex drive there. Mood swings, hopelessness, and inability to complete tasks, self-destructive behaviors. So these are the people that when they're stressed out and when they're struggling with dopamine, they usually will turn to mass quantities of sugar in all forms. Addiction. So again, sugar can be an addiction, as can, drugs and alcohol, as we know, but also sugar and things like shopping, which we'll be talking about. So those can also be signs of low dopamine because they're seeking the addiction. Technology addiction. So you actually get like a small spike in dopamine every time you open Instagram and you see, oh, somebody liked that or somebody commented. But those are short-lived, and that's not the healthy ways that what we're looking for. So you might see someone addicted to their technology. You'll see this a lot in teenagers, actually. Bipolar, if they've got severe depression or any sort of mood disorders, postnatal depression, that also has to do with dopamine because there's a big influx of chemicals reactions that happen after a birth, and you kind of hit this euphoric high giving birth, and then afterwards your chemicals can be all messed up. And then also tendencies towards OCD and self-abuse and insomnia and sleep issues. So quite a bit that is in the mainstream today.
Now, what could be causing some of these lacks? So if we're experiencing low dopamine symptoms, what could be some of the things triggering them? What could be the causes behind it?
Yeah, so the causes generally are, number one, poor diet. Okay, we live in the fast food, instant gratification nation. So most people are ripping open a bag for their nutrition, and that actually doesn't have the right nutrients to support brain chemicals. Okay, so poor diet, eating fast food, eating out a lot, or just not eating enough in general. A lot of people are just on the go so much they don't take in the right calories, and when they do, it's later in the day, and it's something, again, quick and convenient. So nutritional deficiencies, thyroid disorders. So thyroid disorders can actually, if your thyroid's not functioning optimally, can create kind of a low dopamine sensation. And poor lifestyle habits, they overwork, and then they under rest. They don't get enough sleep. When they do have a restful time, it's more around technology or indoors rather than outdoors. And trauma, going through something traumatic like a death or a divorce or a surgery that was really traumatic on the body, that also they can come out of that and have very low dopamine levels. And then leaky gut actually is a big one too that people don't think of, because you need certain nutrients to make dopamine happen in the brain. And if it's not being absorbed correctly in the gut, or if it's not being made at all, then chances are you're going to develop low dopamine. And we see a lot of leaky gut today, as you know.
Yeah, and I would definitely want to add in there, they've definitely proven through studies that high sugar, high fat, standard American diet in mice triggered the same areas in the brain, not only in mice, but also in humans, as heroin and cocaine.
Yes.
So if we're eating the standard American diet for a lot of years, we've been spiking dopamine just like a drug addict for a lot of time. So when you spike dopamine really, really high with drugs and alcohol and standard American diet food, you're creating these neural pathways that are way larger dopamine receptors than you're used to. And that causes downregulation. So it's harder and harder to get the same pleasure off of the same activity or the same thing. So I would definitely caution people against, these things that really, really take dopamine to the next level. And that could be, like you said, the number one thing is diet, what we're eating.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because the one thing I wanted to touch on was more of the unhealthy ways that we can increase dopamine, but these are the ways you don't want to, because it's short-lived and it won't be that long-lasting dopamine in the brain that gives you that motivation. So as you mentioned, the drug abuse and alcohol abuse, basically I wrote down sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, people can be addicted to sex, they can be addicted to drugs, they can be addicted to even music that they get these small hits of, but it's not the nutrient-dense things that they're doing for their body that create this long-lasting, motivating pleasure aspect. I enjoy life, dopamine receptors that we want. Okay, so gambling, shopping, nicotine actually increases dopamine in a short way, in a harmful way, by 200%. Cocaine is 600%, and methamphetamines is 1,000%. So we see why, you hear about people that try crystal meth, and that the first time they take it, they form the addiction. And so that shows you how powerful those hits to the dopamine receptors can be.
And then that explains why people, when they come off these humongous dopamine inducing drugs, that they have such severe depression and anxiety afterwards, because their dopamine is so far behind. So if we've been living a lifestyle, whether it's drugs or whether it's our diet and poor nutrition and things like that, what are some of the main ways, healthy foods, ways that we can attack this and get our dopamine back in balance in a healthy realm?
Yes, and that is very important, is to look at it from a nutrient aspect. I would say first and foremost, if they do suspect that they have something like leaky gut, where they've got some vitamin deficiencies going on, you've got some digestive issues going on, or you're really just not feeling all that great as far as absorbing your nutrients and digesting your food, then for sure eliminate the inflammatory foods and the inflammatory things like alcohol and drugs, but also things like gluten and dairy, and allow that gut to heal. The gut turns over in 7 to 10 days. So I would at least give it 2 weeks, maybe even, up to a couple months, to really leave those stuff by the wayside and focus on some healing foods. And those actual dopamine foods are really healing to the gut as well. So they go hand in hand. And those foods are basically animal products. There are some others that aren't, but wild-caught sockeye salmon is probably one of your best bets for increasing dopamine. Grass-fed beef, and make sure it's grass-finished as well. Lamb, bison, buffalo, pasture-raised chicken and their eggs. And then raw unpasteurized dairy can be really beneficial to boosting dopamine levels too. Also, some people might find it interesting that dark chocolate, specifically the darker the better, so 80% or higher, actually increases dopamine naturally, which is maybe why women, we get a nice big hit, or men too, after that bite of chocolate. So, but it's not just the hit like a drug would be. It's actually going to boost dopamine levels naturally. Blueberries as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
The unhealthy foods people want to watch out for is like what you mentioned before, that high sugar, high fat diet, to where it's like they're having the donut for breakfast and pizza for lunch and then pasta for dinner. The trans fats, the sugars, the artificial sweeteners. So maybe they're on a low fat diet and they're not even taking in fat and they're doing a lot of artificial sweetening of things. All of that is going to actually lower dopamine levels. So they need to be aware of that too.
Yeah, what's interesting, in a study I was looking at the other day, it talked about how when they fed mice a high sugar diet, those mice in particular drank 10% more alcohol than all the other mice uh, that were on whether a high fat diet or a high sugar and fat. So sugar and this dopamine response actually trigger them to drink more. So there could be a correlation there as well with a high sugar diet and people reaching out for that mixed drink or that beer or that cocktail late at night. There could be a correlation there.
Yeah, there's so many things that go along with dopamine. Like if I can share my screen with you right now, let me do that real quick. And this is a study in Science Daily that talks about even the application for depression and addiction. So it says down here, dopamine is now seen as the core neurotransmitter to address symptoms of lack of energy. And then depressed people do not feel like doing anything because of the low dopamine levels. And the lack of energy and motivation is also related to other syndromes with mental fatigue, such as Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia. So many different things go into dopamine and how it can harm us or help us if we have too little or we have the adequate amount. And so it's really important to note that.
So what's your take-home message for everyone out there that's tuning into this? They're wanting to learn, how do I improve my brain health, my dopamine levels? I want to make sure I'm balanced. And what's your take-home message to them?
So there's a few more things we can do outside of just food. So I wanted to talk about some dopamine boosters. Okay, so ways that you can boost dopamine with like lifestyle habits and just living more optimally in general. And one of those is exercise. So there was a Dr. John Racky, author of the book Spark. So people can check out the book Spark. And he says exercise increases levels of dopamine and pain-killing receptors. Everything from weightlifting to stretching, like a nice long stretch class, or what I've been teaching is restorative natural movement, can increase dopamine. So pain-killing receptors, people are turning to NSAIDs, and you pop that ibuprofen when you're in pain, but you could actually do some gentle movement, and when dopamine levels rise from that, you actually reduce pain. So that's kind of interesting too. Sunlight. This is why I'm outside sitting in the sun, is because sunlight increases dopamine through the receptors in the eyes. So if you're wearing contacts, you do want to take those out so that it can get right into the eye itself. But get outside for at least, even 5 to 10 minutes and just look towards the sun. You don't have to look at it, but towards it can boost dopamine levels in an amazing way. And meditation. Meditation increases dopamine. It doesn't mean you have to be all like hocus pocus and sit around and chant Om. But what it could mean is you simply sit and do breathing exercises, or you find that favorite scripture that you want to think about and really ruminate on in your brain. Hobbies like geocaching and knitting, sewing, home repair, those things light up the pleasure centers of the brain, and they actually help to build dopamine. Pleasurable touch, so hugging people that you love, that actually reduces cortisol and releases dopamine. Getting a massage, those are all that therapeutic touch. And proper sleep, that's huge for dopamine. You got to get the sleep in. It's so important to make sure that you're getting adequate sleep, and not just, I stay up till about midnight and then I get up at 8, so I'm getting 8 hours. You want to get those hours of power, which is like earlier in the night from like 9 to 2. Your liver does repair, your gut does repair. And when you're making sure that those are getting their needs met, then you're also going to make the right brain chemicals too. Actually, cold showers at 57-degree water can increase dopamine and productivity by 200% too. So there's some benefit to cold therapy as well. And I can go on, but if people want to learn more about that, they can check me out on Patreon, and I'll be posting there a lot. They can message me and ask me more questions about dopamine, because I've got a whole long list of lifestyle things that you can do.
So basically, it's like we want to get exercise, we want to get outdoors, we want to use our creativity, use our imagination. We want to have love in our life. We want to have spiritual things. All these things kind of balance out and give us the proper dopamine that we need. So I think those are a lot of good tips in what you gave us there.
Yeah, doing those lifestyle practices and eating a nutrient-dense diet, I mean, you're going to feel the effects of a healthier brain within a matter of days.
So great. People can find you at patreon.com/getfitwithjodelle.
No, just Jodelle. So patreon.com/Jodelle.
/Jodelle. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can learn more about either one of us at musclesandveggies.com or getfitwithjodelle.com. Post your comments, questions below. Hit the like button if you learned something from this video. Share it with your friends. Subscribe if you want to learn more. And thank you for tuning in to this small discussion on dopamine with Jodelle and Zach. So thanks for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. Have a healthy day, everyone.